The first thing we're going to be looking at is the tools, where they are for the hair system. So for the hair, we go up to the Simulate tab, which I've always found kind of strange to have it in there. And then you can see here we've got all of these different options for the hair. Now obviously you don't want to keep on going to the top here and pulling out what you need, so it's easier to just undock them from the main menu here. So all we do is go to the top and we just click on each of these. And then once you go through all of these, then I can just give you a brief explanation of what they're for. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now to save time. So I've got all of these options docked on my screen. The most common tools that you're going to be using is the Add Hair, which is initially going to give you the hair on the object. You're definitely going to be using these tools, which is going to give you the option to select different parts of a guide. For instance, you can just control the tips, or you can work just from the roots, points, the whole guide as a whole, or individual vertices. So you've got a good amount of options there. So that's these two. The live selection is another one that you'll be using quite a lot. This is so you can select either a bunch of guides or individual guides to control, and you can make sure that just the selected guides, if you choose to be affected by the brush tools. The next thing is these are your main styling tools. So you've got the move, and I will show you how this works in a minute. The scale is going to affect the length. Rotate isn't something I normally play with really. The brush tool is something you're going to be using a lot, because within the brush tool you're going to have multiple options, multiple brushes within this one tool. You can use the clump. I don't really use the curl. The cut is obviously something that you would want to use, and the push, that's something that is very handy to have, especially when you're working with the roots. Add guides allows you to manually paint guides onto an area of a polygon object, or individually add one at a time, which is very handy, because I found that the less guides you use, the more control you seem to have. And obviously we've got the ability to mirror what we do on one side to the other, and which also works in real time for symmetry as well. The set roots at the bottom here, I'm not going to go into too much depth, but what you can do is you can basically uproot some guides, move them to a different location, and then set them back down again so they won't move when dynamics has been applied. So that really kind of covers these here. I'm not going to go into any of these in this particular sort of toolbox here. There's some of them are pretty self-explanatory. We can copy guides, paste them and cut them, so you can possibly understand what you can do with that. It's quite self-explanatory. I'm not going to go into really any of these other ones, because it kind of goes a bit more to an advanced area that I'm not going to be going into. But the ones that you can see grayed out at the moment here, I will be showing you, is uproot guides, which is kind of works in conjunction with set roots. You can also convert the hairstyle of the actual hairs themselves to guides themselves. So it's kind of a handy way to add more guides to your object without having to manually style them again. You can use the style of your previous hairs to give you more guides, which is quite nice. The set as dynamics is when we basically apply an instant drape of the guides when we first start to do our styling of hair. And when we get a drape and we like the way it looks, what we do is we press set as dynamic, and then what will happen is it will set that as its initial stage. So when we move our timeline to the beginning for animation, it will be set at that initial point where the hair draped. You can then apply obviously dynamics from that point, which I'll also go into as well in this video. The symmetry is obviously to work with symmetry. You start to work on one side of the hair and it will work on the other. Dynamic interaction is pretty cool. Basically, you don't have to press play on the timeline to get any dynamics. You just press this dynamic interaction and the hair drapes, and you can work with it like that. So that's pretty cool, and that's really it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to go through different methods of actually putting the hair onto an object, or in most cases it would be putting guides onto an object, and the guides is what then drives the style of the hair. So let's move on to the next stage.